Hello and welcome to another episode of Conflict on Camera, and we are back to Juno Beach again this time for another photo that I'm sure a lot of you have seen before. It's most often used as a then and now because you can match up all the buildings as they were then and as they are now, but actually there's a much more interesting story, and that concerns what's in the photo itself. So joining me today is my old friend in Normandy, Sean Claxton, who is a World War II TV regular and supporter. Good morning, Sean.
Morning, Paul. Morning, everyone else.
Well, it's on screen now, folks, so I will have Sean talk about it.
So first thing is, where are we? So we're in the village of Saint-Aubin-sur-Mer. It's on the eastern end of Juno Beach. We're on the eastern end of actually the strongpoint WN27, which on D-Day was defended by the 9th Company 736 Grenadier Regiment and was attacked by B Company, the North Shore New Brunswick Regiment, and C Squadron from the Fort Garry Horse with their DD tanks, and then later on by 48 Royal Marine Commando. The picture was taken sometime after June the 10th, and we know that because of what's in it. And the main thing that's in the picture that people focus on, of course, is the P-47, which is laying on the beach. It didn't crash there. It actually crashed at low water and then was dragged up there later. So the P-47 was flown by a fellow called Second Lieutenant John Alfred Weese. He was from Ann Arbor in Michigan, 24 years old. Enlisted in the Air Corps in August 1942. He was part of the 386 Fighter Squadron, 365th Fighter Group, 9th Air Force. They were based in Beaulieu in Hampshire since March. Before that, Gosfield in Essex. The unit had been doing bomber escort, but then when they moved to Hampshire, they conducted like a 2-week intensive course in ground attack and fighter bombing roles, which would be their primary role in the invasion. So on June the 10th, 4 plane patrols over the invasion area, and Weese was in number 4, DH5. Serial number 4276297, as you see from the photograph. He became separated in clouds at about 1:15 in the afternoon, and just after 1, he called out over the radio that it had been hit and that his prop was out and the oil pressure had gone. He said he was about 7,000 feet. He could see the beachhead and he could see large amounts of shipping offshore, and he would try and belly land. The flight leader was a guy called First Lieutenant Valmore Baudreau, and he said that he seemed very cool. We seemed very cool when he was given this message, and gave no indication that he had been injured. We don't know exactly what caused his death, but either way, he crashed and hit the beach at low water mark. His body was recovered, but he was dead. Whether he'd been injured, wounded, or even drowned, we don't know. But either way, he was killed. It was recovered by number 2 RAF Beach Group, who were responsible for basically RAF stuff on the beach, so balloons, motor transport, stores, personnel. Number 2 were responsible for Juno. They'd landed some of them on D-Day, but mostly afterwards. Headquarters was in Courcelles. They recovered Weese's body, and then the next day they dragged the plane to the top of the beach, which is where it is in pretty much every photograph you see of it. We know the aircraft stayed there for at least 3 weeks because it was photographed on a dated photograph, 2nd of July, which I think is the close-up. It's an interesting picture. There's a lot in it. And like you say, most people, it's just a kind of nice, easy match because the buildings are the same. The buildings are almost totally intact. You can see the seawall. They've got all that kind of tangled mass of stuff, which is barbed wire. So it gives you some indication of the German defenses, some indication of the problems faced by the assaulting troops. You have a Sherman DD from, I think, C Squadron Fort Garry Horse, which is up by the beach as well. And just the amount of rubbish which is left laying around. You know, nothing creates waste quite like a war. And there's just so much crap that's just left laying all over the place. It's a really kind of messy scene. There's a truck, I think QL or something like that in the background, probably one of the, maybe from the RAF Beach Group. To me, it's an interesting picture because it kind of gets away from the idea that these sites are very kind of, how do you call it, nationalistic. You know, it's Juno Beach, so you automatically see Canadians, but it's an American plane and it was recovered by a British unit, and it kind of gets across the truly allied nature of the invasion and the subsequent events. And then the other thing is that all this, you know, you look at a photograph and you sort of read into it. So you work out who was the pilot, you know, what happened to him. And then you read the MACR, which is Missing Aircrew Report, and you have the account from Valmore Baudreau. He was 23, so a year younger than Weese. And he's interesting as well. He was, I think, one of the very first people to bring down a Messerschmitt 262. I think the first one to do it solo. Made it forced land rather than shot it down. But yeah, you've got all these kind of knock-on stories that you find when you start kind of digging a little bit deeper into what is basically a very well-known picture.
Well, that's it exactly. I mean, the few of these shows I've done so far, you know, we all have those coffee table book where you flick through them and you have a quick look at that photo and a quick look at that photo, and every single one you could spend half an hour and then go down numerous rabbit holes as you investigate all the elements of it. And your point very well made about the allied nature of the beaches, and we are all guilty of going, you know, you are now leaving the Canadian sector, you are arriving in the British sector, and so you forget your Canadian stuff and start doing your British stuff. And you're very correct to mention this allied nature of it. It's a QLT, I think, by the look of it. So I know you explained that he was hit, but do we have any understanding, Sean, about what it was that actually brought him down?
I think flak, yeah, I think flak's the kind of consensus rather than German aircraft. What kind of interests me in a sense is that they conducted, like I mentioned, a 2-week intensive course in ground attack. Would you consider that sufficient? Because it's a risky job, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, there's other. I mean, I've got plenty of stories of people coming in too low and too fast and that kind of thing, and the risks are readily apparent for anyone involved. And you're inviting yourself as a target, aren't you? And the Germans are not just going to sit back and let you bomb them; they're going to shoot back. So there is an enormous amount of risk.
For those who are watching, I put a link below. We've had Matt Bone come on and Adam Lunny come on shows, and they've talked about being in the cockpit of Typhoons and Spitfires and the G-forces and all those. The P-47 is a big, heavy aircraft that once it's going in one direction fast, it's very difficult to deviate from that path. And so on ground operations like that, the Germans were still a menace. I mean, so I guess at this point, 3 or 4 days after D-Day, the Germans still would have anti-aircraft within a few miles of the beach. Where would the anti-aircraft, the flak would have come from?
Well, I mean, you've got organic flak in every unit, haven't you, really? So the MACR just says over the beachhead. I think it says something like the Cherbourg area, or the Coton, or something like that. It's very vague in terms of where they were flying. But every German division has its own flak, plus the flak units themselves. So, and every German soldier with a rifle or machine gun is going to be having a little pop now and again, aren't they? And it's only going to be that one bullet that strikes the right place or the wrong place that causes problems.
So you just said there about the fact that the flight path is fairly vague. What's your hunch on where it was he was hit? Was he east of the beach, west of the beach? Where do you think he was?
I've no idea. That's the thing. Because we have the photographs of the plane afterwards, we don't even know which direction. The assumption, if you look at it from the photographs we have, he must have been coming in from the east. But that's after it's been dragged to the top of the beach. So we don't have any pictures of it at low tide where it actually landed. So we can't even tell direction from that.
Yeah, because the weight of the engine, there's all sorts of things that could happen with the tail, with the waves moving it left and right. And that's a very good point about taking what we see in a photo at first glance and making an assumption. Because I think a lot of people looking at that photo would have assumed the aircraft had crashed there on the beach in that exact location. I certainly, when I first saw that photo, that would have been the assumption I made about it. I like the point as well about the seawall that you made, because I did the show with Brad Saint-Croix about Bernier-sur-Mer, the famous one with the 9th Brigade guys coming ashore. And when you're standing at that location in Bernier-sur-Mer now, usually the sand is nearly over the seawall today. So you don't get that sense. Whereas if you visit Normandy today and you go to Saint-Aubin-sur-Mer, the sand on the beach is at the same height, roughly, as it would have been during World War II. So you get much more of an idea of the height of that wall and what it meant for those men in the first wave there. And it's also, the angle of the photo is taken pretty much from one of the 50mm positions on the beach. So that is the field of fire of one of the German defences in Saint-Aubin. So it does give you an idea, folks, of that enfilading nature of the fire on a lot of the beaches there. And you're a bit of a bunkers and weapons guy. It's come up a lot on recent shows about the various levels of fortifications on the beaches. But do you know there are trenches and things like that in between the houses? They have fortified a few of the houses as well. How would you kind of rate the defences in this part of the beach?
Significant, daunting, unpleasant, I guess. So you're right. The picture was taken from inside one of the German positions that housed a 50mm or 5cm, 2-inch, if you like, anti-tank gun. It was protected from the seaward side by thick concrete, about 6 foot thick, and it was perfectly sited to cover the beach, as you see from the photograph. We have the aerial picture, the oblique aerial, showing you the trenches. The 50mm gun bunker is there. There's a machine gun bunker, which is no longer there. You had a flak, an anti-aircraft gun on top of a house. So you can see the trenches quite clearly, the little Tobruks for mortars and machine guns, observation, etc. So yeah, I mean, significant. And then the barbed wire, if you look at the picture with the barbed wire hanging over the wall, it looks like kind of camouflage netting or something. It looks like something quite soft, but it is barbed wire, and it just gives you some idea about the density of this wire. It's not just a case of putting up a ladder and climbing over the wall. It's quite a, it's as if the Germans didn't want anyone to invade, in a sense. They were quite serious about what they were doing.
Yeah, yeah. It's almost as if they wanted to keep Europe for themselves, yeah. As an aside as well, I don't like to use the word favourite in terms of a bunker, because they are things designed to kill people. But it is a very effective bunker to explain to people how well sighted they can be. Because when you're standing in that case, mate, it's got 6 fields of fire, is it? Because it can do beach both directions, it can do the fork in both roads to the east, and it can do the fork in the road to the west, and it can also turn inland to the south and fire down that road. There's that other photo that I might cut into the video of the logs across the road where you can see the bunker in the distance, can't you? So very well sighted, so that even if they don't experience a full frontal attack, that position there can cover the area from an attack from the rear as well, which you don't get many examples of those types of bunkers still surviving, because you get the areas inland have been developed, things like that. But Santoban is very authentic in terms of its road layout, isn't it?
If you do use the picture with the logs, it might be good, because when the photograph was taken, you can see people taking cover, because the bunker was still occupied. It was still active at that point.
So the pilot of this P-47, remind us again where he is laid to rest.
So when his body was recovered, it was moved to Bernier-sur-Mer, so just near what's known as Canada House. There's a little area that was a temporary cemetery. He was buried there. Service conducted by a Canadian chaplain called Reverend Harrison. And then after the war, of course, the American families have the option of repatriation, and that's what happened. His family chose to take him back home, and he's now buried back in Michigan, back in the United States.
So there we are. That was an interesting little show, that one. And again, I will make the same plea I make at the end of all of these films. If you've got a photo you'd like to come and talk about, please drop us a line. So thank you very much. And don't forget, it's also that Sean is a Normandy tour guide. He's also starting a project of virtual tours. So the link is in the description below. So if you want to come and visit Normandy but can't get to Normandy, Sean is offering a means of visiting without actually leaving your own home. So that's all in the details below. Click the links below. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you very much for joining us, Sean. We will see you on Conflict on Camera again very shortly. Thank you very much for watching.